This is the Azure Databricks Q1 Product Roadmap webinar. We do hold these once per quarter. Our next one will be held on May 26th, so I hope you'll join that one as well. All right, let's check out who's here. We have a lot of data engineers, 40%. That is by far the largest group here. And then quite a few spatterings of others. Thank you so much for joining us today. Just some quick housekeeping that I'd like to go over. This session is being recorded. You will also not be able to speak or have audio and video since those are disabled. However, we would still love to hear from you. We have a Q&A section, so please do ask all of your questions through the Q&A tab in there, and we have a number of not only our speakers answering the Q&A, but we also have additional members of our product team responding. If we don't get to your question, please post it in the Databricks community. That's Databricks community at community.databricks.com, and a member of the team will respond there. A note about today's content. It is forward-looking, so details are subject to change as we gain feedback from customers. We ask that you don't share this information without explicit permission from Databricks. Now let me introduce today's speakers. Today we are joined by members of our product team, Awaz Saeed, VP of Product for the Unified Data Service Product Group, Clemens Mewald, who leads the product team for Data Science and Machine Learning, and Vinay Wag, who leads Platform Infrastructure and Security Product teams as a Director of Product. Feel free to type your questions to them all throughout the session in that Q&A. And with that, Awaz, over to you.
Thank you, Julie. All right. Let's get started, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the Q1 Roadmap webinar. Exciting set of features and functionalities. There's also a long roadmap, so super excited to share with you all the things that the teams have been working on and hoping to get out to you over the next quarter or two. To make the organization a little better, we are talking about those capabilities in this simplified architecture diagram. So we'll first start off with the data processing and the data storage layer, which encompasses Delta Lake and the processing engines that work on top of that. And then we'll move on to other areas, including security, governance, data engineering, data science, and analytics. So let's start with Delta Lake. So Delta Lake, and this is just an eye chart to just give you an indication of how much investment in Delta Lake, both in open source and in the Databricks version of it. There's a ton of functionality coming in continuously. So I will talk about Delta Lake's functionality in 3 buckets. First is everything that we're doing to actually enhance open source version of Delta Lake. The second thing is about automation. It's about self-management. It's about auto tuning and all of the things which remove the operational headache of actually optimizing your workloads. And the third area is, of course, the new functionality that we have heard from you. So getting into open source first, one of the big goals for us this year is to make open source Delta Lake as performant and a phenomenal way to store your data in your data lakes without even requiring Databricks to operate on the data. So you should be able to use our Java APIs, which can write into Delta Lake without using Spark or Databricks and be able to read from that. You're also working with the community to build a rich set of connectors for it so you can read Delta Lake content directly. So we are working on the Trino reader now. The Flink reader is in preview right now. So if anybody's trying, wanting to use Flink for data processing, stream processing, you could read from Delta Lake too. And the Presto reader for Delta Lake is GA. The other area that we are focusing on open source Delta Lake is to add a lot of performance features. And some of these were already in the Databricks version. So you bring this to open source. The key ones I would point out as optimized for file compaction. It really improves the performance of your read queries, ability to skip, using column statistics to skip files. So it, again, improves performance for reading and writing. So there's a ton of stuff that is happening in the core open source that improves your performance outside of Databricks itself. Now, going to the second category, which is about functionality, we've gotten a lot of requests from our customers to ensure that Delta Lake can support traditional database features and functionality, especially useful in data warehousing. So we've added identity columns, so you can automatically generate unique integer values with identity columns as a special type of a column in Delta Lake that's already GA. We are also working on what we call declarative primary and foreign keys. So this is metadata that you can specify relationship between tables and fields. So it makes it easy for users to find all the joinable tables and improve their queries generally. So that is going to come in preview in the next quarter. The third area of optimization for Delta is really about how to make it work out of the box, right? So minimal tuning, minimal changes to your indexing, what have you, and for all your workloads, right? So the way we're doing that is in a couple of major ways. One of us is known as automatic data compaction. So as the writes are happening to the table, your tables are growing, but automatically behind the scenes, Delta Lake will optimize your data layout. So you get this automatic compaction happening. So your queries continue to remain fast. The third area is, of course, around keeping the natural order. Now, data comes from multiple sources and lands into Delta tables. So if you keep the order in which the data arrives, it actually helps 90% of the queries, which usually access the more recent data. So that makes the query performance better overall. So we've already done that for merge. Delete and updates are coming in Q1. So all of these things will transparently improve your querying performance and writing performance. So you don't have to do anything beyond just noticing the improved performance. One of the things, it might seem a little arcane, but a lot of times when a user submits a query, the amount of time that is spent in query planning, which is understanding where the data for a particular query is, takes considerable time. This is actually noticeable in small queries, which retrieve just a few rows of data. And we really improved what we call the log reading to be able to identify where the data files for a particular query are. So we've reduced the amount of bytes that need to be read from the metadata files of Delta Lake. So we've noticed almost a 3x performance. This is an actual customer workload where the query read performance has gone up by 3x. Now, again, all of these things are happening transparently for you. You don't have to worry about anything. There's no special tuning to be done or options to be set, and you'll start seeing the benefits. Very proud about Photon. Photon has taken off pretty incredibly over the last couple of quarters. A lot of our customers are seeing benefits. You've seen some of the benchmarks we've published publicly in terms of what we've done with the TPCDS benchmarks. We are seeing a lot of performance improvements. It's 2x compared to what the traditional Databricks runtime was. And query performance is actually price performance almost 6x better than some of the older cloud data warehouses out there. And not only in read, we are also seeing the customers get benefit with ETL workloads where you're writing either streaming or large merges that are happening. Photon is working really well there too. So what's coming in Photon? We are working on adding more operators. Sort and window operators are next that are coming in March. We are also improving improving the scan performance of Delta and Parquet sources by photonizing, as we call it, those operations. And then we are also adding structured streaming support, which is coming in March. So a lot of exciting things to complete the capabilities for Photon. One thing I would definitely want to point out is while we are doing all these improvements with Delta, just standalone, like for example, low shuffle merge, which is now available to you, has improved performance by about 1.5 to 1.8 times. But the beauty is that if you actually combine the improvements that we're doing in Delta Lake with Photon, you actually see a lot more benefits, like almost 4 to 5x times faster operations once you have a Photon in tandem with the Delta Lake improvements that you've done. Finally, I'd like to point out one initiative that we have added, which is being able to support partner products. Many of you have said that, obviously Databricks is not used in isolation. There are other products that we work with. So we want to be able to, we want to be sure that these products are supported very well. You're already integrating with many of the products out there, but we've also improved that by adding specific tested partner integrations into our Partner Connect portal, which is easily available in your Databricks UI, which helps you, easily connect to these other third-party systems. Maybe it's Fivetran, Power BI, and get the integration going. What we are doing next in Partner Connect, which is coming in next quarter, is adding a lot more partners. We are adding Arceon, also known as Blitz, for CDC data ingestion, and a much requested partner, which is DBT, which is also coming next quarter. So a lot of exciting things happening there. With that, I'll turn it over to Clemens.
All right, thank you, Wes. So just for orientation, so Wes just talked you through like the data processing foundation really of the lakehouse. And now we're gonna get to the top layer where we talk about the different experiences for different data use cases. Now we'll go into detail on each one of them. So there's gonna be a section data engineering, BI, SQL, and data science. But in this section, we actually talk about the role-based experiences that we have in Databricks and the functionality that's common to all three of them. So as you know, we have three options: data science and engineering, machine learning, and SQL, that really customize the navigation of Databricks to give you the tools that you need for these different use cases. Now, there's a set of common functionality between at least the first two, and you will see that expand in the future. The idea is that you have centralized and unified content management and content discovery, and also like data exploration. So that will be consistent across all three. But then when you switch between the different experiences, you get the tools available to you for those different use cases, like dashboards in Databricks SQL or the model registry in machine learning. So in this section, we'll talk about what is generally true for most of them. And we're going to start with our workspace notebooks. So our notebooks are, as you may be able to guess, very popular, and like we have many tens of thousands of users on this every day, sometimes even hundreds of thousands. And we are investing in making the visualizations much more powerful and consistent between the notebooks and Databricks SQL. So as you can see in this animation, we will actually add the same visualization builder that we have in Databricks SQL to our notebooks, which gives you a more powerful visualization tool. And we will also introduce at the same time multiple visualizations for each cell. Right now you can only have one. And as you can see here, similar to Databricks SQL, you'll have tabs where you can add multiple visualizations for a single cell output. Along similar lines, many of you may have followed the acquisition that we did of a company called 8080 Labs. They built a UI-based tool that lets you do data exploration and transformation using a UI. So here on the right side, you see this should be an animated GIF, but you just see the first frame, how that roughly looks like. So with this, you can load your data, preview it, and do transformations following a UI workflow to filter, clean, and transform your data, even join multiple tables, and analyze it, and look at the distribution of your feature values. Now, this follows the same principle as our AutoML product, which is that it generates code under the hood. So the result of this is code that you can check into your Git systems, run as a job, integrate with your system. So it's a really powerful capability to both give you a UI-based workflow, but also integrate it with the rest of your systems. And this will be in preview pretty soon. Now, once you move your workloads closer to production and have more production rigor, many of our customers care about Git integration. That is provided through the capabilities of repos. Now, within repos, we recently added in public preview a capability to have arbitrary files, which is not true for the general workspace. What that allows you to do is to actually represent any workload in Databricks. So if you clone a repository in repos, all of the files in the repository show up in Databricks. That's most important for factoring notebooks into library files, right? At some point, people take notebooks and factor the code into libraries that are imported from different sources. So that is, of course, supported with this capability. As mentioned, this is public preview. It is opt-in on a workspace level. So if you don't have this yet in your workspace, ask your admin to opt you in. But we'll make this GA soon, and then it will be on by default for everyone. Now, as mentioned earlier, we want to make sure that a lot of capabilities are consistent across the product. One of them is actually content discovery. So we're working on a new global search that will allow you to find all content in Databricks from one central place. It will be a better search experience than we have today. It will actually be a full page modal that lets you search for content, filter by type, and also, as you can see in the preview here, have advanced features such as previewing the content of, let's say, your notebook that actually match the search, which also indicates that this is actually content-based search. We will slowly add more and more content to the search. So we'll start with, and this is already in private preview, notebooks, libraries, repos, files within repos. And then we'll extend that to Databricks SQL content, so queries and dashboards. And then we'll extend it to data, so you will actually also find your data in the same search. And then we'll move on to MLflow experiments, models, and so on. So eventually, this search will really cover everything that you have in Databricks. Now, once you're ready to run your production workloads, in most cases, the production workload is a DAG of some sort. You have like multiple steps that you want to run in sequence. And we have that capability, of course, in our job service. Now, we do know and realize that our customers want to run any arbitrary workloads in Databricks. So that's why we actually taking our job service and the concept of running these DAGs and expanding it to what we call workflows. So here in the top left, you can see workflows is the new name that we will use in the left nav item. And that will contain both our jobs and also Delta Live tables. And some of you may have already seen, our job service in the future will support running an Airflow DAG, which is a very popular feature. We'll also provide native support for dbt, which will be covered in a later slide. So the idea is really that you have a very powerful and generic workflow management system that can run any workload that you would expect on Databricks. Now, on this slide, you can see the multi-step job feature that is already in general availability. So you can express a DAG of jobs, and each step can be in a notebook or a jar or any other task type that's supported. It's a great replacement for notebook workflows if you're still using that, because it's a central orchestration service that makes sure that the DAG is actually being executed, does error recovery and so on. That's much better than just running a notebook that calls another notebook. And we've been adding capabilities to this. One most important one is actually the reuse of job clusters between steps, which allows you to basically run multiple steps on the same cluster, which is much faster than spinning up a separate cluster for each step. And of course, it also saves money if you can run everything on the same cluster in sequence. Now, there's a lot of capabilities that we're adding to the job service. This one is in preview. It's the integration between our Git service and the job service. For the most demanding and critical production workloads, you actually want to make sure that your job runs off a well-defined Git reference. So you may want to say, run this commit hash, or run head of this branch, or a specific tag. So this is a capability that will be available in the job service natively. So you can say, run this job off of this Git repository and this Git reference, and the job service will make sure that we run this exact version and nothing else, which is extremely important for robust production workloads. I alluded to dbt already, so Abhay mentioned that we're partnering closely with dbt. One way that will materialize itself in the product is that we'll actually have dbt tasks in our job service, so that you have native capability of running dbt within Databricks, and a lot of benefits such as accelerating these workloads on clusters that have Photon enabled. And here you can see a sign up to join the private preview waitlist for this capability. And then once you have all of these jobs running in Databricks, no matter what they are, right, like Databricks native jobs, Airflow jobs, or dbt workflows, of course, observability is extremely important for your production workloads. We'll both provide a native set of capabilities in our product to monitor these jobs and their health, but also integrations with popular tools like Prometheus, if that's what you prefer to use to monitor your production services, which is extremely important because a lot of our customers run critical capabilities on this functionality. And I think there's one or two more slides on workflows. This one calls out some more advances of the job service itself. I alluded to earlier, we're improving the capabilities to repair and rerun failed tasks, because if you have a DAG, sometimes one node in the DAG fails, and you should be able to repair that and continue running the DAG from there on. And also making it easy to pass values between tasks, right? The output of one task is the input to another task. So that is a native capability that we're adding. I believe there's another slide where we talk about the DB SQL task type in more detail. There you go, right after this. So I alluded to this earlier. We will introduce workflows to Databricks SQL and allow you to express multi-step jobs that run SQL queries from the SQL product directly, which is extremely important. A lot of our users want the ability to run multiple SQL queries in sequence. So we're basically introducing the same capability to Databricks SQL. And for advanced use cases, of course, you can combine different task types, like SQL queries in Databricks SQL, notebooks, jar files, anything that you would need for a specific workload. All right. And with this, we're going to go into more detail on the data engineering persona. And that's back to Wes.
Yeah. Thank you, Clemens. All right, so now we've covered the platform section. Now let's go into the different functional areas. We'll start with data engineering first and move on to analytics. So before we get started, if you don't mind, if you take a few seconds to answer this poll, that'd be very useful. Well, thank you. Let's see. All right, so both notebooks and ADF and things, mapping tools, okay, ETL, that's great to hear. That's interesting. So not much local development we can see. That's good input for us as we try to see whether we need to invest more in the local development experience. All right, so classic ETL, let's start with the ingestion first, and then we talk about the transformation capabilities that we are bringing with Databricks. So autoloader has become the de facto way of bringing data in. We have got a ton of new functionality in there, and especially it makes it very simple for people to just set it and forget it. Being autoloader automatically handles any errors, be able to recover, and all of those things. You can run it in batch or streaming, so it has a lot of benefits to it. Now we've seen a tremendous adoption of it, and we've also had a lot of customers asking for additional support. We always supported JSON and CSV. We've added Avro support, and Parquet is coming next quarter. So autoloader has become the deal way to bring data into Delta Lake. Now there's another command that is also used, which is a SQL-based command called copy into. This is very useful for ad hoc ways to ingest data in. It has many of the capabilities that autoloader has. Including schema inference, you'll be able to give schema hints. It's very performant too, and has an ability to autocorrect data, especially with the errors. One of the things that we have added is a way for analysts who are using this copy into command to provide inline credentials. So an admin doesn't need to set up all the permissions to ingest data from ADLS, what have you, right? So it makes it easy to bring data in with copy into with one-time credentials. It may be interesting to note that at Databricks, we are actually investing a lot in UI, so really moving towards much more low code, and we are doing this for ingestion. So we'll now have, just like the create table UI that you're familiar with, actually expanded that, made it much more powerful, being able to connect to different systems, including local and cloud storage, and also use partner solutions, ADF and things like that to bring data into Databricks. Another area that we have noticed has seen a big uptake is stream processing. Now it's normal, as you can see, as the amount of volume of data grows and our customers want much more real-time analytics. Structured stream processing is becoming much more popular these days. So we've seen a large growth in customers who are using stream processing to process the data in near real time and serving the data up into Delta or using, writing to another streaming message bus. So one of two things we are working on, I think, are specifically significant. One, we are improving the metrics that we track, so at every second, and how performant your entire end-to-end stream is. So if there's anything is falling behind, if there's a specific node that is slowing you down in terms of making sure you're getting the end-to-end latency. The second thing we are working on is really lowering that latency. And sometimes we've advised users that a minute latency is what you'd expect, especially when you have a complex stream processing logic. But we are working to reduce that to seconds level. But more important that we want to make sure there's consistent latency. So if you're expecting 10-second latency between when the data enters the system and exits, we want to keep that. Another big thing we are very proud to announce is Delta Live Tables is going GA in Q1. So thrilled about that. If you haven't heard about Delta Live Tables, It is a phenomenal way to build ETL logic going forward. It's a way to have a declarative specification of your data flow, all the way from your sources to the target with the intermediate user tables. You can add quality expectations in there to ensure that data meets the quality standards that you have set. And also, the best part of Delta Live Tables is it makes operationally much simpler. So it takes care of running those pipelines. You can easily switch from batch to streaming. You get to have very crystal clear observability and a lot of benefits that come from using Delta Live Tables for ETL. Now, customers have asked us to, of course, expand some of the functionality we have there. What we have refocused on in the last quarter is really supporting change data, especially to implement slowly changing dimensions. So we have added support for SCD type 1, slowly changing dimension type 1. Now we're also adding it for type 2 that is coming in March. So it makes it very simple for you to use simple SQL-like logic to apply changes and into basically effectively the merge statement within Delta Live Tables. Another cool thing that we have coming up is auto scaling. So the auto scaling with Delta Live Tables is actually very smart. So it actually looks at the history. It not only looks at how much backlog is happening in your system, but also your compute utilization and your history to make intelligent decisions on when to scale up and when to scale down. We've always been good at scaling up. It's always been trickier to scale down to give you the same throughput and latency. So that's what Delta Live Tables is solving. What are we working on in Q1? I would say there are several interesting things. Top ones would be you'll be able to preview your data within your Delta Live Tables pipeline. So it's easier to debug and understand how your data is being transformed. You also have support for Unity catalog integration that's coming and any custom libraries that you want to add into your pipeline. All right, now let's move on to SQL Analytics from data engineering. Now, of course, Databricks SQL went GA on Azure in December of last year. Very thrilled with the adoption and usage. So we are hearing a lot of good things about it. Databricks SQL, radically changes the way you think about your data infrastructure, bringing data warehousing capabilities, analytics and reporting capabilities directly on the lakehouse itself without having to copy the data over. We are investing in three major areas: performance, which is a constant theme, as you can notice from our presentation. The second area is improved analyst experience, and third is a better admin experience. Let's talk a little bit about the performance side of things. So we've talked a lot about how we have improved the performance with Delta Lake and with Photon for processing engines. But another area we are working on is workload management. So here, what we're doing is want to provide consistent experience for users, no matter whether small queries or large queries. We don't want users submitting small queries to get blocked behind a big load. So the idea is to have multiple work queues. And so the system intelligently routes the small queries and the large queries to the appropriate queues. So you get the consistent return times and response times for the queries that are being submitted. Of course, it uses things like query history information and the query plan to decide which queue it should go to. A key area for us, this is super exciting, is Serverless DB SQL. So here, Databricks manages the compute service for you, automatically running a fleet of up-to-date, upgraded, patched compute that can be used to serve your users. So benefit of course, is the cost is much lower because we keep the compute up and going for you. You don't have to worry about starting it up, shutting it down. Have to worry about slow initial query performance because we manage all the compute and make sure that you get that kind of response time to require and you don't have the latency for your initial queries. One thing we always hear from customers is security. There are concerns about having the cluster running within Databricks' cloud. And the idea is we want to provide you with much better security than you're ever used to. Of course, your data continues to stay in your account, encrypted with your data keys. All the links between the workspaces and your data is going to go through private link going forward. The private link within the serverless environment itself is coming in Q1, and then the outside one is going to come in Q2. All right, So one other area on the serverless itself is even improving the first query performance times. It's the order of 30 to 40 seconds today, and we are bringing down that by 2 quarters down to less than 2 to 3 seconds. So this is even for the first query that you submit to your Databricks SQL serverless. Moving on, let's look at the improvements for the data analysts. So a couple of things that we are working on here. First is we will support the ability to run SQL or SQL commands over REST API. So those of you who don't want to use ODBC, JDBC, and want to integrate with your applications or your custom dashboards, you can use REST API, submit your SQL command, get back the results as JSON, and the query metadata as JSON itself. So it makes it much more easier to integrate in your programs. Another thing is connectivity. Obviously, many of our customers use tools, Power BI being a major BI tool that connects to DB SQL. So we have added other partners also in there. In the coming months, we are expanding support for Power BI, especially supporting custom SQL queries that users may have, and which is actually quite common within Power BI. Clement's already covered this. You're bringing workflow capability into DB SQL, so now you can actually orchestrate your different queries, but also mix and match with workloads that you may have in notebooks, right? For example, you may have some procedural logic there that you want to mix and match with your SQL queries that you have. So now you can be able to take all those tasks and orchestrate them very simply right from within DB SQL without having to leave that environment. So now you can get almost the power of ETL for DB SQL, so we can run the multiple transformation logic steps that you need as you move the data within your lakehouse, all using SQL itself. We also covered this about having a UI for ingesting data. So one of the things that is coming soon is the ability to upload data into DB SQL from your local disks. And this, of course, was supported in the notebooks, but we are adding that for DB SQL, and in future we'll expand that to additional sources like ADLS and so on. In terms of what we are working on, the SQL development experience, we've made a lot of improvements. It's already in public preview in terms of making those editors smarter, autocomplete, syntax error highlighting. You have multiple tabs. All of those capabilities make it much more simple to develop. We're also adding Python UDFs. This is a very often requested feature. So now you'll be able to use Python UDFs in your DB SQL queries. Another one we have GA'd recently is being able to do aggregations right with the UI rather than having to go and change your query to add a group by or a total sum, what have you. You can actually do that within the UI itself. So it reduces the amount of time you have to go back to the query to change it. We are now expanding that to also work with time columns. So you can do better group bys on time columns. We call it billing, and you can do that all within the UI. So you can create the different groups based on year, month, day, what have you, and do this in the UI without having to go change your query itself. So much more UI, clickable UI rather than having to change SQL itself. And then one of the things we wanted to also improve is sharing of the results. So you can share your dashboard that you have built. That URL can be shared with other people in your organization, and you can embed the web pages into your own application. So that makes it much more simpler for even users who don't have access to Databricks accounts. Another interesting thing is a lot of people are using folders in workspace folders, as we call them, within our notebooks as a way to organize all your content together. Now the same concept is also available in DB SQL, so you can organize your queries, your dashboards, along with any notebooks you have to create a single way of collecting all your relevant objects. In future, we'll also have the ability to add DB SQL objects to Git repositories, so you can version control your queries and improve its lifecycle management. Finally, moving on to the admin experience, we have added the capability to look at your query plans in a tree view, so you can understand where the blocks are, which part of your query is taking a lot of time. So if your users come and say a query is running slowly, you'll be able to very easy to understand where the blocks are in a particular query. So we have had this tree view. Now we are expanding that with a tree view. It's a graphical view, but much more easily understandable. So I can understand the flow of your data and the sequence of operators, and you'll be able to identify the bottlenecks and what causes the query to be going slowly. So it's just a lot more visibility and crystal clear understanding of how your query is performing. And finally, what I would end by saying is you also have added better visibility into how your SQL endpoint itself is performing. So you'll be able to see the metrics associated with it, diagnose the issues by looking at the history of it and see if there are any problems, if there are any slowness happening at the SQL endpoint itself and correlate it back to your query performance. So overall, it's about providing better observability for the admins to understand how the queries are performing for your users, as well as understanding how the system is performing. With that, I will turn it back to Clemens.
Awesome, thank you, Wes. So we just talked about the data engineering persona and DB SQL, so let's jump into machine learning capabilities specifically. As all of you know, machine learning Databricks provides you with data native ML capabilities for the full lifecycle. That includes, feature engineering with feature store, model training, and model deployment. We'll go through some of the capabilities and some areas that are new within machine learning. Some of these slides I'm going to go through quickly because you're already familiar with this, and there's just a couple of new announcements. AutoML is a very popular capability in Databricks that is currently in public preview that will be made GA soon. It's extremely popular mostly because it provides you with both a UI workflow to get to your best model and be able to deploy it, but also generate code under the hood that you can either pass off to experts if they want to customize it, or check into your Git systems, or integrate it with your deployment pipelines. Now, within AutoML, time series forecasting was one of the most requested capabilities that is now in public preview. So you should be able to see a new task type in AutoML called forecasting that does rely on a specific machine learning runtime. And I think in the screenshot you can see here that will tell you that you should use Databricks runtime 10 or higher to use the forecasting capability. Initially, that used only Facebook's Profit library for forecasting, which is very popular. But on the next slide, you will see here under the models and tuning column that we're also adding ARIMA models to forecasting to give you different model types and to see how they perform. This slide is an overview over everything that's coming in AutoML. On the left side, you see also a very popular requested feature, which is dropping columns from your data in the UI. So this was, of course, already available through code, but in the UI, you can also now exclude columns to use in AutoML. And we're also investing heavily in text transformations because it turns out a lot of the data that our customers use for AutoML contains text. And we're using advanced embedding techniques to provide better transformations for your text inputs within AutoML. Next, the feature store is really a core capability to bridge the gap between raw data and your machine learning models. Feature stores are extremely important, specifically for features that you want to have available both at training time and at model serving time consistently. So things like pre-computed features, right? So like purchases last 7, 14, 21 days per user are something that you cannot compute in real time at model deployment. So the feature store provides those features both in batch for training and also at low latency for model serving consistently. There's a lot of advancements that we're introducing to the feature store. One of them, as I just mentioned, on the online deployment side, when you use these features online for low latency model serving, there's two important capabilities. One of them is which database to use to provide these features in very low latency. And the way that we do this, and like every other feature store does it, is the features are being published to an operational database, such as a MySQL database. So here you can see on Azure specifically, we already support the Azure database for MySQL and the Azure SQL database. And we're also working on Cosmos DB, which is a very widely requested capability as well. This is a pluggable interface. We will continue adding more online stores to the feature store as our customers request them. And then the second component is that the serving capability that when a model is deployed needs to have access to these online stores. And we started, of course, with this for our own serving product. So it is available for Databricks serving in its current form. And we are working on it for Databricks serverless serving, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, which of course will also support this. But we're an open platform, so we'll also add support for other ways of deploying your models as REST endpoints. Two more capabilities on the feature store that are noteworthy. The first one is actually already in public preview, which is native support for time-based features. So that is related to the fact that many features, like the example that I mentioned earlier, which is purchases last 7, 14, 21 days, are time-based. And if you have a feature like this, it's computed regularly at different points in time. So our feature store has a first-class concept where you can declare the timestamp of a feature table. And that is important for many different use cases. One most important one is point-in-time joins. When you have multiple feature tables that computed feature values at different points in time, and you want to join them together, that's actually a non-trivial task. And the feature store APIs allow you to say, give me these 3 feature tables at this point in time, and we take care of the complicated point-in-time join for you. Of course, it's also important for time-based splitting of your data when you want to split your training and evaluation data at a specific point in time. So this is already in public preview, so in our documentation, very powerful capability. And on the right side, you can just see the logical conclusion of like the feature store being adopted by more and more customers for production workloads. We have more and more customers that actually like run the feature store fully automated, which means that they just want APIs for everything that you can do in the feature store. We always have these APIs, we just don't make them public immediately. So here you can just see 3 examples of APIs that we are now making publicly available to automate these types of workloads. Once you actually deploy the model itself, so like once the model is ready for deployment and enters the model registry, also along the lines of production deployment, we have made the webhook capability in our model registry public preview. That's extremely important to automate the model deployment lifecycle. We have customers that have millions of machine learning models, and they don't follow the UI workflow to deploy them. So they use the webhooks feature to register callbacks to their CI/CD systems. And it's extremely powerful to basically like be more rigorous and automated about the model deployment lifecycle and how models make it into production. Along the same lines of production model, actually like retraining in many cases. As some of you may know, if you train a machine learning model in a Databricks notebook today, we automatically create an ML2 experiment that's attached to the notebook to track all of the experiment runs. But then when you, let's say, schedule that notebook as a job that runs every day to retrain the model, that capability hasn't existed yet. So we are introducing the same concept that exists for notebooks in the job service. So there will be job experiments. Let's say if you take the notebook and retrain it every week we will log these retraining runs to a job experiment so that you can look at your historical training pipeline. You could have already achieved this manually today, but we're automating this in the future. And I believe last but not least, model deployment and serving. I've alluded to this already. We made model deployment specifically from the model registry much easier. So there's now a button that says use model for inference. And then the most common deployment type today is batch inference. You can just say this model, this data set, please create a batch scoring job. And then also like more popular is low latency online serving, which exposes the model as a REST endpoint. Now that exists today, it doesn't auto-scale today and it doesn't provide production-grade SLAs. So we are introducing a new capability called serverless model endpoints, which is an auto-scaling production-ready serving product that provides high availability SLAs. That's extremely important for our customers that have like very rigorous production workloads. And it's the same user experience. It's one click, and we give you a production-ready endpoint. A lot of our customers are really excited about this because it significantly simplifies the operational process of bringing these models to production. All right, and with this, I'm going to hand it over to Vinay, I believe.
Cool, thanks, Clemens. So let's talk about the layer in the stack that is responsible for securing and governing the whole platform across your lakehouse. Let's start off with Unity Catalog, as that's the central piece that enables a lot of this stuff. This is a really exciting project at Databricks. Think about Unity Catalog as a central metastore that allows you to sort of govern permissions across all of your workspaces within Databricks. In the coming months, we're going to be focused on releasing support for fine-grained governance for Python. We're going to support search and compatibility with our existing Metastore. And in the coming year, we're going to move towards features like attribute-based access control, system tables, row-level, column-level security, and also support for additional kind of languages. Now, like I mentioned, Unity Catalog is a centralized data governance for your lakehouse. There are a couple of things to note about this, right? You can have shared Python clusters now with dynamic view support. Unity Catalog closes any of the loopholes related to security that we had there. The second thing you can do is you can actually leverage external tables or managed storage to link Unity Catalog to your existing data sets. And then you can manage and govern those data sets within the Unity Catalog itself. For those of you who are already using the Hive Metastore in the product, it's not a lift and shift to use Unity Catalog. In fact, through the magic of namespacing, we're going to have both of them coexist and easier transition into using Unity over the Hive. So it's not a hard cutover, in order to use UC. We are also releasing the UI as part of this, which is going to allow you to centrally manage. So imagine getting into the accounts console, which I'll be talking about a little later, and then creating a Metastore that's now shared across a bunch of workspaces, essentially kind of unifying all your teams and teams that are working in different workspaces through a common governance framework. So the UI will allow you to create Metastores, manage what workspace can use it, and make it easy for admins to actually administer this across multiple teams. The other thing, which is exciting, is the table metadata search. So once you have data in the Unity Catalog, you're going to be able to search for tables, columns. The search is going to leverage all the table metadata that comes in, and the permissions that you've applied on who can actually do what will apply to the search as well. So one interesting thing about this is it also allows you to search across all tables, and eventually across data science and machine learning and DB SQL, you'll be able to see different tables through one kind of pane of glass, which is really important, as you'll be able to see how different disparate groups be able to relate what their work is and what tables they're actually using, which is really interesting. This is one of the most awaited features. Wes told me I'm going to get applauses when I talk about this, but data lineage is basically going to capture a runtime data lineage across all your languages, down to the table and column level. And the benefit of this is that all changes that you're making, or as you update different data sets and tables within Databricks, you'll understand the downstream impact of these to the various consumers of those things. And an interesting sort of effect of this is also when you generate these reports for compliance or whatever reason, you can also verify that these actually came from trusted sources, because now you have the lineage kind of data to prove it. And then, of course, there's also audit logging and other aspects of this that will be captured in real time. Let's talk about delta sharing a little bit. Delta sharing is the first open protocol for secure real-time exchange of large data sets. We announced this in Data and AI Summit, I think in 2021. And if Unity Catalog allows you to share data within Databricks, delta sharing is going to allow you to share it across, across companies, right, outside of your company, externally. The thing with delta sharing is it's based on open protocol, and what we do is we don't stipulate what products you can use to do the delta sharing, but delta sharing allows you to, what we do is essentially manage a sharing server where we can do the escrow of security. We implement the security for secure sharing of this data externally. So in the coming months, we are going to focus on that piece of it, because I think that's kind of core to what to the sharing aspect of this, is the security piece. We're going to build UI and other things and deliver the first version of this. But then in coming years, we're going to be focusing on different languages, ability to specify limits and those kind of things. But let me quickly get into what it is, right? So with delta sharing, you can share large data sets, but not only do you have to exchange large tables and kind of re-exchange the whole table, but you can actually share slices of that data. So you can change data for the tables that you're sharing. What we do is we have a Delta sharing server that creates tokens when you create a share. We provide that token essentially goes to the recipient, and we validate that token, and we create a pre-signed URL in order for you to access the data. These tokens are rotated periodically, and they are also time-bound, so they expire frequently. So this enables you to not have to worry about the actual token management and security management of this when you share externally. So that's really good. We also have auditing capabilities built in, so that when you do any of these shares and it's accessed and all those other things, there's a sort of comprehensive audit log that you can reference to see what activity is happening with the Delta share. It is open. You can use different kind of tools to share, but it is integrated directly into the Unity catalog. So you will be able to create from the Unity catalog, be able to create shares that you can share externally with other companies. So we have a nice tight integration with Unity and Delta sharing. If you share between Databricks customers, because Unity is involved, we can actually, it's a verified data sharing. It's more secure. We have more control, so we can validate the recipient and various other kinds of things. Like I mentioned before, you can have a Delta change data feed while you're sharing to just, for new data as opposed to sharing the whole table again. And we're going to be delivering a UI for Delta sharing within the product that's going to allow you to create these shares, specify the recipients, you can choose the tables that you want to share, and make it simple for administrators to do it. Along with that, you can also specify an IP access list for the recipient. So you can say this specific share can only be accessed from these IPs, which could be the VPN of that other customer that you're talking about, or specific kind of egress points in their network. Now let's talk about the account console. As we've spoken about Unity, we've spoken about how we configure all this, but where is that UI, right? And I think one of the things that are new here is we're going to have an accounts console in Azure, where the first thing that the accounts console you'll be able to do is basically create a meta store in Unity catalog and decide what workspaces and configure what workspaces they'll be able to access through the accounts console. This is the first kind of capability, but the accounts console has a rich roadmap on many other things, like from managing costs to like getting visibility across workspaces. So you will see a lot more coming on this down the road. People use the product today know that every time you create a workspace, it's a separate group of users and groups that are synced. You skim individually on each workspace. With Account Console Identity, what we're doing is the Account Console I just mentioned, we're going to have identity synced to one kind of thing, which is the Account Console. And then from there, admins get to decide which users can access, which users and groups are assigned to which workspaces, right? So it makes the whole aspect of kind of syncing a lot simpler, because you're not now managing syncing across, I don't know how many workspaces you have, like multiples of workspaces, but you can do it centrally and then make it easy to assign them to different workspaces. This ties in really well also with Unity, because now you have a central place of governance, you have identity in a central place. You can say this group can only access this kind of tables and this kind of workspaces, and it's all going to be enforced for you. So it's a really easy, it simplifies the security story quite a bit. The other aspect of it is settings management. A lot of requests from customers saying, like, I want administrators in our workspaces or users to be able to do more, but I don't want them to disable certain key security capabilities, because then I'll violate my compliance. So, well, how do you solve this? So right now we are coming up with a feature called settings management, where you'll be able to set certain things when you create a workspace, like certain settings, like, oh, this has to use customer managed key, because otherwise I'm not allowed to use, process data in Databricks. And so you can set these things at the account level, and it'll be enforced at the workspace. Even admin cannot kind of change them. So that allows you to show your InfoSec and compliance teams that you're complying. Now, the first thing we're going to release with this is HIPAA and PCI, and I'll get into that a little bit. But you will be able to say that we want only these compliant workspaces, and then we'll make sure that they are enforced across all the workspaces that are created. Personalized onboarding is a way for you to create a custom experience for people using the product within your organization. So earlier you would get in and users would figure out by clicking through different aspects of what, how do they actually go and, what data sets, where they are, how they're going to query. With personalized onboarding, you kind of make that simple. So that time from when they kind of get into when they derive value out of it and be able to run queries is much faster. This is something that's coming couple of quarters out. So it's a little bit more, longer term than the other items on the roadmap, but we are moving to a vCPU-based model for clusters, wherein you don't specify instance types, but you specify what type, meaning compute, memory, storage optimized, and how many vCPUs do you need. And then we end up, obviously provisioning, launching the right instances. And the reason we're moving to this model is there are, customers have a lot of requests around making sure that instance availability does not cause failures of cluster launches during peak season. Or, for example, you run out of you basically want to maintain the cost profile of a certain workload, but you're flexible on the instance types that you use. And so what we can do here is we can make those decisions, based on what we see. So we will have deep pools of instances, or we'll have launch instances with deep pools of capacity. So you're covered in that sense. Or we can substitute one instance for another, while maintaining cost if it means that you're able to launch your clusters and move ahead. So those kind of capabilities are all part of this. And this is a couple of quarters out at least. Private link, we are going into public preview for private link. This is a big infrastructure kind of capability for us. It's in Q2, we're going into public preview, which means anybody who wants private link can just get it. Today it's in sort of like a gated fashion. We enable customers. And the other thing we're doing is we've launched is the ability for private link workspaces to also have access over non-privately through a specific IP range. And this is useful because you may say that all my users are going to come from through a private connectivity, but allow these, this other VPN from another office location to come in without that. So earlier you couldn't do that, which meant that, it restricted the use of this workspace across a wide range of users. With this, now you're flexible in which network they actually come from, which is really useful. And customer managed keys is, this is a feature where you get to own the keys for the data that we store in the control plane and data plane. We've delivered the stuff for control plane. When it comes to this release, we're supporting key rotation through an API where you can say, change the key that you're using to encrypt data in your control plane. And apart from that, we're also private previewing, sometime around Q2, we'll be private previewing the CMK for encrypted managed disks on Azure. So the disks that get attached to your clusters, today we don't support CMK for that. And so InfoSec compliance will be like, okay, you're not using our keys for everything in the cloud. With this, you can kind of complete that and say, okay, the final bit is closed. All disks that we attach to the clusters will be encrypted using a key that you own. And that's it, like right on time, I guess. Julie, you want to take it on?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to Awaz, Vinay, and Clemens for everything. And thanks everyone for attending. We are at time, so I'd love for you to please respond to this poll question that's about how the experience was for you for this roadmap webinar, if you would recommend it to a colleague. This helps us keep tabs of making sure that these sessions are valuable and providing what you need. So please do go ahead and take a quick second for this. And then we have, in our next slide, we ask for feedback. So you can actually write in some feedback of how we can improve, and it will help you even more. So please take a second for that. As I mentioned before, our next one is on May 26th. So look out for the invitations for that. And with that, thank you to everyone who joined. I'll switch over to this next feedback section. Please do type in a response for us. We love to hear any feedback that you have. For all the questions that we didn't get to, please post them in the Databricks community, community.databricks.com. There were 200 questions or so today, so even though we had the Q&A personnel and our speakers responding, we still had some that we couldn't get to. So please, if we didn't get to them, I'm really sorry, but please do post them in the community and someone will respond to them there. The deck will not be shared in terms of slides, but we will share the recording a few days after the event. You'll receive an email with the link to that recording. All right, with that, thank you everyone for joining today. Have a great rest of your day.